New research from Omdia, Hub and Antenna underscore the growing importance of advertising in streaming across fasts and premium SVOD. Listen on to learn more.
Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Stream. This is Will Richmond from Video News, and Colin Dixon from Endscreen Media is with me again. Colin, how is everything for you?
It's been great, Will. I've been roving the northern lands of the UK for last week, and boy, what a beautiful countryside up there. Northumberland is in England. You better like rain, though, because it rains a lot. But your reward is beautiful green country and fantastic castles and dramatic beaches. It's just a wonderful place.
That sounds like a fun trip. Welcome back.
Yep. The only thing I brought back that I didn't want is a cold, but we will soldier on notwithstanding. Today we're going to focus a lot on advertising. There's been a lot of data released in the last week or two about that, and you're going to get us started with a sort of global view, right?
Yeah, so we're looking at Omdia research, their forecast for CTV advertising over the next 4 years. So they are, and this is global, by the way, global forecast, that sees the global CTV ad revenue increasing to $81 billion by 2030. And that would be up from $44 billion in 2025. Importantly, looks like from their perspective, the market's going to be dominated just by three companies, Google, Amazon, and Netflix. And they project shares for each one of those companies in 2030. And combined, the three companies account for about 48%, almost 50%, half the market. And just to kind of put some numbers to that. So Omdia says that Google, obviously with YouTube as the main engine there, is forecast to have 26% of the global CTV ad business. So 26% of the $81 billion in 2030 would be $21 billion for Google on CTV only. Amazon would have 13%. That translates to about $10.5 billion. And Netflix would have 9%, which would translate to $7.3 billion. So Omdia sees these three companies really as the breakout companies as we go forward into 2030. And we have a lot more data we're going to talk about in a moment from Hub and also from Antenna related to the surge in ad-supported consumption and also ad-supported revenue. So that's Omdia. Colin, any take on that?
Yeah, one of the interesting things is that they cited 5 reasons for sort of driving this growth, and they were real quickly expansion of ad-supported streaming services. Well, we'll get to that in just a minute. There's plenty of data to support that. Convergence of retail media and television advertising, growth in programmatic and targeted, increasing importance of TV operating systems and smart TV ecosystems. That's something that we've covered in detail in the podcast as well, and that's certainly happening. And finally, greater competition for consumer attention and platform ownership. Yep, that's there too. I think they're missing one though, Will. One of the things is that the broadcasters themselves, I think, have begun to recognize that this is a market that they can no longer ignore. And they're now moving to participate more directly in it. A great example of that, of course, is the BBC recently announced that they will be creating content specifically for YouTube. So this is content that may not find its way into the broadcast sphere at all. So this is like a recognition now by broadcasters, mainstream broadcasters like the BBC, that not only can they not ignore streaming, they have to be a part of that streaming ecosystem and create content that suits it rather than is specifically for broadcast TV. So I think that is actually going to be a very important driver, certainly on the global level, of the growth in the amount of CTV advertising revenue.
I think that's a very fair point, Colin. Actually, one other thing I just want to observe about the Omdia data is that it did not, these are global numbers, it did not break down by region of the world. And I would think, I'd see if you agree with this, but that the U.S. is still going to be the by far the leader in CTV ad revenue.
I think you're probably right there, Will. And remind me, what was that number for Google that they cited? How much you calculated the dollars?
26% of the 81 billion would be 21 billion.
21 billion. So what, Google, I think in the last quarter they announced that YouTube earned 12 billion in advertising revenue. So that's actually that could be a substantial part of YouTube's overall revenue picture. So I guess that sort of speaks to the increasing importance of CTV to YouTube in its generation of revenue overall, right?
I think that's right. So let's move on, Colin. Another source of data this week was Hub, which shared some data around the role of FAST.
Yeah, actually, I think they sent this data out last week, Will, or maybe the week before, but I think it's very relevant to our discussion today. And there were a couple of things in there that really jumped out at me. The first is that, first of all, they see FAST as a very important part of the ecosystem. So I don't know if people are generally considering YouTube as part of the FAST ecosystem or not. I think it probably should be, but whatever they say, I think their data is excluding YouTube, but they say that a majority of TV viewers here in the US, at least 55%, have used at least one FAST service, and roughly half of regular FAST users, 46%, say these services are a must-have part of their entertainment ecosystem. So fasts are definitely part of that overall 80 billion revenue picture in 2030 and will be a growing part of that picture and are helping to attract traditional TV advertising into the CTV world. And they had some really interesting statistics about fast users, which I thought are very relevant to our discussion. The first is that fast users tend to watch more TV than non-users. They say they asked how many hours of TV do you watch per week, and fast users said 24 versus non-users 22. I think the thing to take away here, people always underreport how much TV they watch, Will. I think that's pretty much a standard. So don't take the 24 and 22 hours to the bank. But I would say that the fact that fast users report watching more is significant. That's a significant fact there. They also asked if fast users use the service as a replacement for paid subscriptions or as an additional way to watch TV. And by far the most said it was additional, 60%. Only 15% said it was a replacement. So this really seems to suggest that FAST is in support of paid services like SVOD. And that's something we'll get to, SVOD's role in the ad ecosystem and in the ad revenue world in just a second with some more data from Antenna. So I thought that was also significant. There was a couple of other really interesting facts, Will, and they sort of help point out what's going on actually in the market. The first fact they tell us is that 85% of fast users regularly watch YouTube versus 66% of non-users. That is a significant difference here. And I think it helps explain some of the moves that we're seeing in the market right now. This week, it was announced that Roku is launching a creator, what they're calling a creator hub. And so in that hub, they've invited a whole bunch of creators to provide content that will be available for free through the Roku channel. And we're talking about people like Mr. Beast, Real Bros, Preston Brianna, and a bunch of other providers here. And as we know, the Roku channel, of course, is one of the leading providers of content, of free content in the market. I think around about 3% of TV viewing in the US, at least, according to Nielsen, is going to the Roku channel. And it's about the same for Tubi, and we'll get to Tubi in just a second. So I think this is very significant that creators are becoming a much bigger part of the economy, and really is a good reflection of what Hub was saying, with this 85% of fast users being very interested in YouTube and the creator content, which is its main constituent. So that kind of explains why Roku is doing this, really focusing on creator content. And by the way, they're not the only ones, of course. We've seen creator content launch in a whole bunch of places, including on Netflix and most recently, I think there was an announcement about HBO Max adding creator content in the European market. So this is definitely a big trend currently in SVOD as well as in the fasts. And this is reflected more specifically in the Hub data. And they say that creator video is a must-have for 48% of fast users. So that's also, I think, just a reflection of what we're talking about here, that fast users really like creator content. The other sort of corollary here from the fast user data is that the fasts are really in support of paid services. John Giegengack, who's a principal at Hub and who we've had here on the podcast a couple of times, he said in this data report, free is a reason for people to try a service, but it's not enough to create real engagement over the long term. And that, I think, is a great statement, sort of really reinforces the fact that fasts are in support of the pay services. And what we see in the market is that is how the owners of the properties are using them. So a great example of that is an announcement this week from Tubi, that Tubi, of course, is owned by Fox. And they say that Tubi will have, I think it's probably already launched, they're going to have a 2026 FIFA World Cup Fox hub. They're going to have a FIFA World Cup hub on Tubi. Now, it's going to have very specific content. They say Tubi will simulcast live in 4K the opening ceremonies and 2 matches, very appropriately for our market, Mexico versus South Africa and US men's national team versus Paraguay. So those are 2 early matches. This is in the early part of the tournament when we're in the group play before we go to the sudden death section. So there'll be a bunch of other content on this channel, but mainly sort of in support of World Cup. If you want to watch the games, you're going to have a pay service. You're either going to have a pay TV subscription, or you're going to have a subscription to Fox's Fox One streaming service. So this is a great example of how the providers are really using their free services in support of their paid services. So this will help transition people into those services if they want to watch the rest of the material. I thought that the hub data really sort of encapsulates what we see happening in the market today, Will.
Yeah, I think all those are great points, Colin. And I'll just add also, I think something that you didn't mention is that, free is obviously the biggest draw of these fast services. But the hub data also did note that there were some other factors that are viewed as beneficial, in particular, the quick ability to access programming. Again, just being able to open the app and not even necessarily in some cases having to create an account. So 40% of users cited that. 33% cited the ease of discovery, that it's easier actually to find things to watch on FAST than it is on other platforms. And last but not least, and we know this, we've heard this many times in the past, is this sort of nostalgia viewing, the fact that FAST services tend to really be much more about library content, and that is the comfort food aspect of FAST services. So 46% say that they most often watch older shows, whether they've seen them or not. So there you go with the value proposition of FAST, right?
Yeah, and that's interesting, Will, because bearing in mind that FAST now are producing targeted originals, and they are beginning to draw in some of the most popular creators. I wonder how this might change over the next couple of years, if that content will in fact become a major draw into the FAST services. But that's something I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I would say they've got to have to produce a whole lot more new original content to outdraw the library content, but we'll wait and see, right?
I think you're right. I mean, look, the nostalgia titles are certainly what pull me into the FAST. So I'm certainly in that 30% or whatever, 32% that say nostalgia titles work. But anyway, we have some really interesting data from Antenna on how SVODs are participating in this ad economy, right?
Yeah, so let's now shift over to Antenna data, and this is data our podcast listeners know we have tracked closely, and the big news that keeps coming out of Antenna is the increasing importance of the ad-supported tiers that premium SVOD services are offering now. And this is a segment of the market that continues to grow. I'm just going to highlight a few of the key numbers from the most recent State of Subscriptions report that Antenna has provided a preview of. But ad plan subscriptions increased now from 100 million to 110 million in the end of Q1 2026, and no change really in the fact that Hulu has the biggest share of premium SVOD ad subscriptions. They have 23% of the market. They've actually just been declining slightly as a percentage of the overall market over the last few quarters. But and then you have Peacock next with the 17% share. And actually that's together with Disney Plus. And Disney Plus has really accelerated their ad-supported presence. They added 5.4 million ad-supported subscribers in the quarter, and that was increased their share by 4 points. So that's the basic lay of the land, up to 110 million ad-supported subscribers. And acquisition continues to grow. We again see that Hulu is the leader. Hulu's clearly been the leader in this ad-supported tier market, but we have comers like Peacock, which had actually the largest year-over-year growth. In Q1 26, they had 2.2 million more gross ads than they did in Q1 25. And Antenna also says that there are now 4 services that had over 10 million gross ads in the ad-supported tier in 2025: Hulu, Disney, Peacock, and HBO Max. So just a couple more statistics to share here quickly that were of interest. Really 3 services that had the biggest gains. So HBO Max, Disney Plus, and Netflix all increased the amount of their share and also their volume growth. So just looking at the overall market, ad plans continue to drive the majority of acquisition for most services. So, we look at Peacock is at 63%, Hulu's at 70%, Disney Plus is at 70%. Then lower ones like Paramount Plus at 36%, Netflix at 54%, HBO Max at 55%. But we continue to see a lot of growth in this market, Colin. No surprise here. I think that people are price sensitive. They want to have these streaming services, but we've seen price increases from all of the services multiple times, actually, in the last few years. And no doubt we have consumers managing their streaming budgets, and that's what in turn makes these lower priced ad-supported tiers so popular.
Indeed, and as we've noted in the podcast, the SVOD providers have been increasing the cost of watching ad-free to try and encourage as many people as possible to be on the ad-supported tier. Netflix, of course, is the leader there. But I think pretty much all of these have a significant difference between the ad-free and ad-supported tiers. It really goes back to sort of that hub data, which shows that low cost is a significant factor in using fasts. I think costs is probably the dominant factor pushing people to subscribe rather to an ad-supported tier. I mean, if they were the same price, who on earth would subscribe to an ad tier? Well, of course, everybody would subscribe to an ad-free tier, right? But it sounds like, a big difference between ad-supported and ad-free viewing really does push people, and it is a significant difference. It's, in the order of $10 for many, many of these services that we've talked about here. $10 a month, that's $100 a year. So that's enough to push a significant people. The other thing is that pretty much all of these services, with the exception of Paramount Plus, most people now, when they come and sign up, are signing up ad-supported. So there's general acceptance by people that this is an acceptable swap for their time. And so I think certainly Omdia's forecast for the growth in Netflix and Amazon Prime, or Prime Video rather, the growth of their dominance here is probably justified by this data, although I should note that Antenna does not include Amazon Prime Video because, of course, most people don't pay for Prime Video separately. But even there, Prime Video just increased the penalty for watching ad-free as well. So this is definitely a trend we're seeing in SVOD, and apparently it's resonating with consumers.
Yeah, as the old adage goes, we pay for media with either our time or our money. And it seems like with the rise of these ad-supported tiers, people are shifting to say they would prefer to pay for it with their time rather than their money. And I don't think that's any great surprise. And, for a long time, as we know, a number of these streaming services were resistant to launching ad-supported tiers. Netflix was right there at the lead in terms of being a resistor. And now look where they are. They actually announced last week that they now have, I believe they said 250 million active users on their ad tier, and that they're going to be expanding it to another 15 countries in the coming year. So they are, I would argue, Colin, they are the biggest convert to the benefits of having an ad-supported tier.
I think you're probably right. And I'm just thinking about my behavior. As our listeners probably know, I do not like watching ads when I'm focusing on the television. And so I tend to subscribe to the ad-free tiers, even ad-free tier of YouTube, which, by the way, if you're a big YouTube user, you should really consider doing that. It really improves the viewing experience pretty dramatically. For me, when I am just looking to have TV on and not really pay attention that much, that's when I go to fasts. I'll put a fast on with a library title, and maybe I'll have my laptop in my lap while the TV's on, and I'll switch my attention back and forth between the TV. That's when I do my what I consider to be my low quality viewing. But when I am high quality, I want ad free. So I wonder how many people are like me. That would be a really interesting piece of data. Maybe I'll reach out to John and see if he can give us some insight on that. John Giengak over at Hub.
I think you're unique, Colin. Nobody does things like you do.
Or I don't think I'm anything special. I think there's probably a bunch of people like me, Will.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground with all this different research. We are both continue to be fascinated by the growth of ad-supported, whether it's as part of a tier for premium SVOD providers or as FAST and the role that FAST is providing. So lots more to come, no doubt, on this topic.
There certainly is.
Okay, Colin, good chatting, and thanks everybody for listening in on this week's edition of Inside the Stream, and we'll see you all again next week. Inside the Stream is a production of In-Screen Media and Video News, all rights reserved.